soft, atmospheric piano music begins. Playing underneath the narration, the fog had been rolling into San Francisco since dawn. Thick and silencing, wrapping the steep hills in a soft, gray blanket. It was the kind of weather that made the sprawling city feel intimate, almost secret. Maya Lin moved through her wellness clinic with a practiced, quiet grace. She adjusted the warm lighting, folded fresh linen, and reviewed her schedule. Doing everything she was supposed to do while carrying a familiar, unspoken heaviness. At 37, Maya had learned a difficult truth. The world doesn't pause for your grief. It only demands that you keep walking. She lived in a minimalist, sun-starved apartment, a space that perfectly mirrored how carefully she guarded her own heart. After a painfully sudden canceled wedding in her late 20s, she had realized that giving everything to someone didn't guarantee they would stay. Maya was exceptional at helping others heal. As a somatic therapist, she listened, she soothed, she unknotted the physical trauma her clients carried. But when it came to her own life, she expertly dodged the quiet moments when the silence grew too loud. That Tuesday afternoon felt like any other. Busy, rhythmic, but hollow. Until she glanced at her 3 o'clock appointment. Julian Hayes. It was just a name. Ordinary, unremarkable, yet, looking at it on the screen, a strange flutter of anticipation caught in her chest, feeling she immediately brushed aside. Miles away. Julian sat in his parked car, gripping the steering wheel, wondering why he had booked the appointment at all. At 41, his life was a picture of polished stability. He was a successful corporate strategist. He had a sleek condo overlooking the bay. But beneath the tailored suits, he carried the suffocating weight of a marriage that had dissolved in, but with a slow, agonizing freeze. Seeking a fresh start, he had left Manhattan for the West Coast, promising himself he would focus strictly on logic, on work, on never being emotionally blindsided again. But the body keeps the score. Stress had woven itself into his muscles like iron wire, tightening his jaw, shallowing his breath, and serving as a daily reminder that ignoring your pain does not make it vanish. Taking a slow breath, Julian stepped out into the damp air and walked toward the clinic, completely unaware that this singular choice was about to alter the trajectory of his life. When he stepped through the glass doors, Maya greeted him. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were incredibly sharp. She immediately noticed the exhaustion behind his gaze. The rigid way he held his shoulders, the posture of a man desperately trying to hold his world together. Their introduction was simple. Polite greetings. Routine paperwork. Yet the air in the small reception room felt suddenly dense. As if an invisible current had sparked between them, Maya guided him into the therapy room. Her voice a calm, steady anchor explaining the session. Julian listened, surprised by how quickly his usual defensive walls began to lower. As the session started, the frantic pace of the outside world simply melted away. The distant sirens, the crushing deadlines, the ghosts of past failures, they all faded into the background. Maya worked with absolute, mindful focus. Her hands were intuitive, applying deep, deliberate pressure to the knots in his back. Lying there, Julian experienced a revelation. For the first time in years, nothing was being asked of him. He didn't have to perform, he didn't have to lead, and he didn't have to explain his scars. His breathing deepened. The iron wire in his muscles began to snap and release. And with that physical surrender came an emotional flood he had held back for half a decade. A quiet, profound grief mixed with an overwhelming sense of relief. For Maya, the shift was unmistakable. She felt the exact moment his guard dropped. It wasn't just tissue relaxing under her hands. It was a soul exhaling. It struck a chord deep within her, a sudden, piercing reminder of her own buried loneliness. She knew nothing of Julian's history, yet in that dimly lit room, they were sharing the exact same frequency of quiet survival. When the hour concluded, a gentle, heavy silence hung in the room. Julian sat up. He felt completely untethered, yet grounded like a man who had suddenly remembered how to swim. He looked at Maya and whispered a simple "thank you," but the words carried the weight of a confession. Maya met his eyes, startled by the sudden rush of warmth in her chest. They parted with polite goodbyes, but as Julian stepped back out into the San Francisco fog, the world looked entirely different. And as Maya stood alone in her clinic, she realized a tiny, long-dormant ember had just caught fire. By his third visit, the shift was undeniable. Julian walked in slower, his posture open, his eyes seeking hers the moment the door chimed. The room warmed the second they shared a space. The professional boundary was still there, but it had become delightfully porous. Where there was once polite silence, there was now a flowing stream of conversation. They talked about obscure jazz, the stark difference between East and West Coast winters, and the books that had changed their lives. They were casual confessions, but they were laying the bricks of deep, unshakable trust. Julian realized he was terrified. He was actually looking forward to these sessions with a teenager's nervous excitement. Finding excuses to linger in her neighborhood long after his hour was up. Maya, too, felt the thrilling, terrifying pull. She constantly reminded herself to stay composed, to be the professional. Even as her heart raced every time she heard his voice. It happened on a crisp Thursday evening. Weeks later, Julian didn't book a session. Instead, when Maya locked up her clinic and stepped out into the twilight, he was standing beneath the amber glow of a street lamp. He wasn't a client seeking relief. He was a man seeking truth. Her breath hitched. She didn't ask why he was there. She already knew. They walked side by side toward the Embarcadero, the dark water of the bay lapping quietly against the piers. Julian spoke first. His voice was unsteady but resolute. He told her he was done hiding. He told her about the fear of being vulnerable, but how the fear of walking away from her was suddenly much greater. Maya stopped walking. The city hummed around them, but they were entirely alone. Looking up into his eyes, she finally dropped the shield she had carried for years. She spoke of her own guarded heart, the scars of being left behind, and the beautiful, terrifying realization that she felt safe with him. It wasn't a movie scene. There was no torrential downpour or dramatic screaming. It was far better. It was two adults, bruised by life, looking at each other and deciding the risk was worth it. Julian reached out, his fingers brushing hers before gently, firmly taking her hand. The simple contact sent a rush of heat through them, both a confirmation that the healing touch of the clinic had blossomed into something deeply, wonderfully romantic. "I don't know exactly how to do this," Julian murmured, a small, genuine smile breaking across his face. Maya squeezed his hand, stepping just a fraction closer. "We'll just go slow," she replied softly, "one step at a time." As they continued down the pier, hands intertwined, the dense fog that had blanketed the city for weeks finally began to lift, revealing the bright, endless scatter of stars above. They had found each other in the quietest of ways, proving that sometimes the most profound love stories don't start with a spark. Sometimes they start with a simple, healing breath. Music swells, warm and triumphant, then slowly fades out. Going slow, they discovered, wasn't about a lack of passion. It was about deliberate, mindful presence. The weeks turned into months, painted in the golden hues of a California autumn. Maya's minimalist apartment slowly began to gather traces of him's favorite coffee mug left by the sink, a jazz record spinning on a Sunday morning, and Julian's pristine, sterile condo began to feel less like a corporate showcase and more like a home, softened by her easy laughter and the thriving green plants she brought into his space. There were still moments of fear, of course. Old reflexes die hard. When a particularly stressful acquisition at Julian's firm threatened to pull him back into his familiar armor of isolation, he didn't shut her out. Instead, he showed up at her door, tired but open, simply asking for a moment to sit in the quiet with her. And Maya, when the anniversary of her canceled wedding approached, bringing with it a ghost of the old, familiar heaviness, finally allowed someone else to hold her through it. She realized, with tears she didn't try to hide, that she no longer had to carry the grief alone. They learned that healing isn't a destination you reach and then stop. It's an ongoing dialogue. It's choosing each other day after day in the quiet, unremarkable moments in a world that constantly demands we keep running. Maya and Julian had finally found the one thing worth standing still for. A quiet harbor built for two.